Hi people, it's Chilli here from Live Listener Raised, and you know why you're here, so let's get into this 5-minute review. When I started doing the 5-minute reviews on my channel about a year ago, I was happy to do so as I could talk about music I enjoyed to those who would listen. But there are some bands I knew I wouldn't be able to discuss with new musical releases. One of those bands, for example, are Motorhead, because, you know. Another band that I guessed would be on this list would be Porcupine Tree, because they had split up for about 10 years, and in that time Steven Wilson was releasing plenty of solo projects. But these solo projects just weren't the same as Porcupine Tree. I'm not saying that Steven Wilson's solo career has been bad, in fact quite the opposite. But when I heard in interviews that one of my favourite bands would never reform because Steven was past that point in his life, it was a bitter pill for me to swallow. On one hand, Porcupine Tree is Steven, and I do love Steven's... On one hand, Porcupine Tree is Steven, and I do love his solo career. I think he has to be one of the most underrated musicians out there in the field. On the other hand, his ego can be a handful, and his latest solo album, The Future Bites, seemed fresh yet forgettable. Electronic rock music is best left to Radiohead after all. Would this be the path that he walked for the future of his musical career? Constantly complaining about the future and how shit the current music scene is, as he voices his gripes for bands like Greta Van Fleet ripping off the Led Zeppelin sound. Steven, you can't talk there. You ripped off Pink Floyd in your early career, and rode that to success. Even Porcupine Tree's album The Sky Moves Sideways is set up exactly as Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here. There is the long track that's split up into two at the beginning and the end of the album, and of course there is the acoustic track. The more I thought about this interview, the more I resented someone I had admired, but I began to think of what Porcupine Tree became. They evolved into a heavier sound after Steven worked with Opeth to produce their album Blackwater Park, and maybe Steven was just passing on some collective wisdom, like a warning to Greta Van Fleet to evolve their sound, or live in the shadows of one of rock and roll's greatest bands. After all, Steven had stated in interviews that he regretted writing music to appease Pink Floyd fans and wanted to distance himself from this. Any Porcupine Tree fan can say they have successfully done so. This leads me to this review now, and I thought I would never get to cover this band, but here we are, because Steven has got the band back together with our long-time bass player Colin Edwin, and this is their 11th album, and most likely last, called Closure Continuum. Where to begin? I made a list of Porcupine Tree albums ranked from worst to best in anticipation for this album's drop, which I will link now, and you can click it below if you want to see that video. And the one person who disliked the video but failed to comment on why or even add to the list, thank you for your valued input as ever. It was duly noted. So I delayed even listening to this album, knowing that this might even be their finale, and I was very nervous to even hear it. What if it was a flop? What if I had built it up so much I didn't even think it would sound the way I thought it was? Maybe in my mind I was overthinking these things and expecting too much. There was only one way to find out, and so I finally listened to the album. Harridan is the first track and opens with a massively thick bass solo. So thick, you can hear that thing slap off the fretboard. So ferocious, it's like a cobra rearing to warn you that it will strike. It's worth mentioning here that Steve wrote and recorded all the bass parts, as well as the guitar sections, so keep this in mind. The drums are tight and keep rhythm throughout, as well as the keys providing a tremendous atmosphere for the quiet parts before it gets downright heavy in tone. A massive wall of sound eventually builds into this track, and it is a fantastic opening song. Of the New Day follows up and shows that mellow sound of Porcupine Tree that the fans will know of, with some odd chords, and there is an air of unease, and then the song turns out to be so heavy, and the riff just pounds you. It's like the rug just getting ripped out from underneath you. This is the case with a fair few songs on the album. They have this softer part, and then they come in crushingly with this heavy and thick guitar tone. This might be just my opinion, but I don't think there is a weak track on this album, except maybe Walk the Plank, which can take its own advice. This might be because it's in style to his last solo album, covering the electronica side of things, and I've already stated how I disliked that release. The only catch is there are a lot of good tracks like Dignity, Of the New Day, and Population 3. All good tracks, but I'm not sure that I could say that they were great. Each song features interesting movements and musicianship, in particular on Population 3, which appears to be an instrumental loose jam track, or at least has the potential to be one if done live. There are some true bangers in the mix though. Never Have has a haunting opening with Stephen's lone vocals accompanied by the keys of Richard Barbary. Ironically, the lyrics seem very poignant and almost seem like the pride before the fall, and it is almost self-acknowledging perhaps to the previous points that if you never let go of the past, you will never learn. Another couple of great tracks are The Culling of the Herd, which the band has stated via Twitter is based on a very specific event in history, but it also deals with the broader theme of paranoia in modern day. Some have alluded to the Hitakaifek murders or to Quatermass. Maybe it has to do with Chupacabra, but ultimately, who knows? It's a great song though, along with the last track, Love in the Past, which ebbs and flows seamlessly. I can't forget the song Chimera, and that is my favourite track from this album. And it is also one of the first tracks that they recorded for this album all the way back in 2013. That's right, this album was recorded in secret for nearly a decade. This song's acoustic intro is eclectic as the pace begins to slow before picking up, and Stephen lays himself bare on this track lyrically. It's chilling, but it's mesmerising, and at nearly 10 minutes long, it is quite the roller coaster ride. From Stephen's lyrics to the bass line that follows in Steed, and the change of time signatures around the halfway mark, this is a masterclass right here, up until the last lyrics are sung. You don't want to skip this track. It was very difficult to rate this album. It took me a while to truly enjoy and come to terms with it. I feel like I could sum up my feelings upon hearing this album on my first playthrough with the Simpsons scene right here.
Hey, give me one of those famous giant beers I heard so much about.
Something wrong, Yank?
No, it's pretty big, I guess.
It was a Porcupine Tree album, but I wasn't sure how to acknowledge it at this stage. Overall though, I think this album deserves 4 million chilies on the spicy scale, with my favourite tracks being Love in Past Tense, Never Have, Chimera's Wreck, and Herd Calling. Subsequent listens have made me realise this is a great album, and fans of prog rock like Marillion or maybe Flower Kings will enjoy this great album as well. I also have to wonder, with the dynamic shift in sounds to a degree, what extent this album is a Porcupine Tree album and to what other extent it is a Stephen solo piece. At the end of the day, Porcupine Tree is Steven Wilson, and after 12 years, the band's sound is bound to change. So longtime fans may be surprised by the less of a metal approach compared to their previous albums. But we have to acknowledge our change in taste of music as well. Initially, it might not have been the Porcupine Tree sound I was expecting, but it is the continuation of music and their evolution in style. I don't think this album is so far-fetched in sound from their original sound that it will alienate longtime fans, but maybe some might be in the same boat as me and find it a little jarring upon first listening. I think before the year is out, I would like to revisit this album and review it again and see how it stands, as I believe it will grow on me more throughout the year. But right now, this is where it stands. Oh, and a FYI, this album's spot on my list of worst to best is After the Incident, but that might change after 5 months' time. Who knows? So, thank you for listening to this episode of 5 Minute Reviews. I'm Chilli, do the socials, and stay spicy out there. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Live Listen Erased. And if you have enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it with all your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our Chilli Con Carnage Crew so you can get notified for all the future videos that we put out, as we put out videos every Friday. Also, we are on Discord, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter over at Live Listen Erased, so make sure to tune in over there. And don't forget to like this video so that our manager can stay very happy.